In this video, I'm going to compare the two most popular iPads on the market today, the iPad mini 6 and the iPad Air 4, to come up with a recommendation of which one you should buy. Now, the question I get here all the time is, Mike, which iPad should I buy? And like any good consultant would tell you, that really depends on what your needs are and what the product can offer you. So in today's video, we're going to break down all the features of the iPad mini 6 and the iPad Air 4, figure out which one you should buy. Let's get started. Now today's video will be broken down into different sections, and I have each one of those sections pinned right below the like button. Now here on my left, your right, is the iPad Air 4. Here we have the iPad mini 6. First thing we're going to talk about here is about price. The iPad Air 4 starts at $599 for 64 gigs, and it goes all the way up to $749 for 256 gigs. The iPad mini has a similar pricing structure, coming in at 64 and 256, but it's $1 cheaper at each price point, so $499 and $649 respectively. You can add 4G to the iPad Air 4 for $130 or 5G to the iPad mini 6 for $150. So depending on what your use case is and what problem you're trying to solve, you can get the device pretty similarly configured for relatively the same price, maybe less $100 or $120 max difference. Now the iPad Air 4 has a 10.9-inch LCD display in comparison to the 8.3-inch LCD display that is on the iPad mini 6. They're both 500 nits of brightness, they both have P3 color gamut and True Tone support. The difference is the number of pixels per inch. Here on the iPad Air 4, we have a total of 264 pixels per inch in comparison to the 326 pixels per inch on the iPad mini 6. That's just the way that the iPad mini 6 is designed. You get more pixels per inch, the text is more clear when the sizes are smaller, which, depending on how you're looking at it, that could be a detractor for you if you want something with a bigger display. Obviously, the iPad Air 4 might be the clear winner there for you. But in terms of just overall display quality, they're really the same in my opinion. They give you the same amount of brightness, same amount of depth. The colors themselves look accurate. Depending on what you are optimizing for and what your problem is, will depend on which one you place higher value on. I am optimizing for portability, which is why I like the iPad mini 6. But again, you might be different. Here on this device, it does add Touch ID, and the Touch ID button is in the sensor, much like the iPad mini. And it seems to be the same generation Touch ID button because it works about just as quickly. Now, in terms of battery life, Apple rates both these devices for about 10 hours worth of web browsing time using Safari. And in my experience, I get about 9.5, almost 10 hours on the iPad mini 6. And well, I'm going to mess this up 100 times. And just over 10 hours on the iPad Air 4. So you are going to get roughly about the same amount of usage depending on how you have it configured. I wouldn't necessarily call one a clear winner over the other in terms of battery life. Now let's talk about the rear cameras on the iPad Air 4 and the iPad mini 6. So essentially the camera sensor itself is going to be the same 12 megapixel sensor. They are both capable of recording 4K 60. They're both capable of recording slow-mo at either 120 or 240. And they are both capable of HDR3. Really the big differences in both of these devices is that the iPad mini 6 has a True Tone flash, where the iPad Air 4 has zero flash, no flash. Now it's also going to support cinematic video stabilization at 4K 1080 and 720p in comparison to the iPad Air 4, which only supports it at 1080 and 720. So it doesn't support cinematic video stabilization on the iPad Air 4 at 4K video. The other big difference here is on the iPad mini 6, you are getting a 12 megapixel front-facing ultra-wide camera, which is used with center stage in comparison to the 7 megapixel camera that is on the iPad Air 4. It's not bad, but it's not as good, and it doesn't give you the ability to take ultra-wide photos, which that may or may not be important depending on what problem that you are trying to solve. For me, I would rather have the higher megapixel camera and the center stage technology on the iPad mini 6 versus the lower quality iPad Air 4. Before we get in the next section where we're going to test the cameras on the iPad Air 4 and the iPad mini 6, if you are enjoying today's content and finding value in it, consider hitting subscribe and being part of the community where we review iPad content, iPad productivity. And if you think other people would enjoy this comparison, like you see like here with the iPad Air 4 and the iPad mini 6, go ahead and consider hitting like. I would appreciate it. Now let's get on to the testing for the cameras on the iPad Air 4 and the iPad mini 6. Here is a video sample of me recording on the front-facing camera of the iPad mini 6. This is me looking at the camera. Now this is me looking at the screen, me looking at the camera, me looking at the screen. All right, so this is the front-facing camera on the iPad Air 4. Here's me looking at the camera itself. And then here's me looking at the screen, me looking at the camera, me looking at the screen. So you can see there's a little bit of a difference there. And now we are recording on the back of the iPad mini 6. Let me know what you think about this quality down in the comments below. Now here's a test of me looking at the camera itself on the iPad Air 4. Let me know what you think of this audio quality down in the comments below. Now, I just listened and watched both of those clips, and what was surprising to me at least is that I have the iPad in the same stand to take those calls. And even though I had them in the same stand and roughly at the same distance, right, the iPad Air 4 is a little bit taller, so it might be a little bit different. But the iPad Air 4 audio was much softer than the iPad mini was, and I'm not sure why that was. I was speaking normally like I am right now, but that's one thing you want to take in consideration. I think that the iPad mini 4, maybe iPad mini 6, I did it again. I think the iPad mini 6 looked a little bit better than the iPad Air 4. I'm in front of a big soft box right here, so it should have good video quality in both these cameras. Again, that's something for you to consider. Which one do you like better? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, in terms of sound, even though both these devices have 2 speaker grills on the top and 2 speakers on the bottom, they actually only have 2 speakers. And those speakers are orientated when you were to turn the device and maybe watch something in landscape, play a game, whatever the case is, you then get a stereo sound. These speakers do sound good, and I'm actually going to do a test here of each of the speakers playing the same music to see what it sounds like. Now, it might be hard to discern this over video, but here in the room, I can tell you at least the iPad Air 4 sounds fuller. It does sound more, it sounds better than the iPad mini for sure. I would say they sound different. The iPad mini is just a little bit more, maybe muddy is maybe a good way of explaining it. And the iPad Air 4 is the clear winner in my opinion. Now, when speaking of accessories, both these devices have the same accessories that are supported kind of from first party perspective, like the Apple Pencil. And there are some dissimilarities between the two where you're thinking about external keyboards and hubs and things of that nature. So here the iPad Air 4 supports the Apple Pencil 2 on the side of it, just like the iPad mini. You can use it to store it, charge it, and carry the Apple Pencil with it when you're using it. And the experience on the iPad mini is exactly the same. In my opinion, it really comes down to personal preference, and that personal preference is how large of a canvas or surface area do you like or maybe even require in order to interact with it using the pencil. I don't necessarily mind using the smaller canvas with the Apple Pencil. Some people would, depending again on what you're trying to solve and what your use case is. Maybe if you were a student taking notes, you might want the larger canvas size on the iPad Air 4 versus the iPad mini 6. If you're looking for portability, that's obviously where this is going to reign supreme. In terms of keyboards, the iPad mini 6 does not have a smart dock connector, so any keyboard that you want to connect to this, you will need to use a Bluetooth keyboard or something that's going to connect to the USB-C port on the bottom here. That is in comparison to the iPad Air 4 where it has a smart dock connector. Now, the smart dock connector does allow you to connect a first-party keyboard like the Magic Keyboard or even a third-party keyboard like the Logitech Combo Touch, which is my favorite. And if you're looking for a review of it, I'll put a link above here in the video card. Now, it's decision time, and we need to figure out which iPad is going to be best for you. Do you want something that is highly portable, or do you want something with a larger display? Because each of these iPads are priced very similarly. As these devices were released about 12 months apart, the iPad Air 4 had an older processor, it has the A14 processor in comparison to the A15 on the iPad mini 6. The A15 processor is the same processor that you find in the iPhone, which has a 6-core CPU and a 5-core GPU. There really is not going to be a significant difference in terms of processors because they're really just a year apart. I would say focus on what use cases that you're trying to solve. Are you more concerned with portability and future-proofing? The iPad mini 6 to me is a better choice because it's smaller, more conformable in my opinion than the iPad Air 4. But if you want something that's going to excel at multitasking because of the larger screen, you want something that's going to have better applicability with accessories like the Magic Keyboard, like the Logitech Combo Touch, those things would draw me to the iPad Air 4. But really, unless you have to buy it today, I would say I would consider trying to wait maybe a few months. You know, the rumors are right now that the iPad Air 5 would probably come out in the fall. Now, let me know what you would choose down in the comments below. My name is Mike. This is Tech 24/7 TV. Folks, I'll talk to you in the next one.